What is it? I think he's their leader, their controller, Jamie.
I'm Cleek. Eric Cleek. I have brought you back to life. We at the Logicians have planned this. You're alive because of us. Now you will help us. We need your power. You need our mass intelligence. Are you listening? Do you understand me? Now that I have released you... Let me go! I set you free! It was all planned! You belong to us. You shall be like us.
Oh dear. Well, audience, it looks like I'm going to have to deal with this mess, but in the meantime, here's some more Troughton Month content. Yes, anyway, cyber controller time. Oh my giddy aunt.
Hello everybody and welcome to Troughton Month. Now when you think of Second Doctor villains, there are quite a few that come straight to mind, from reoccurring villains such as the Yeti and the Great Intelligence, the Ice Warriors, and whilst they wouldn't return during his era, the Macra count as reoccurring monsters in the show. And of course, the last two Dalek stories of the 1960s took place under Patrick Troughton's run, including his very first episode. But when it comes to Second Doctor adversaries, there's one villain or monster that he's faced more than any others in his era: the Cybermen. And today I'll be taking a look at the second and, in my opinion, the best Cyberman story from the Second Doctor's era, as well as my favourite Second Doctor story, and one of my favourite stories of all time, The Tomb of the Cybermen.
Oh, same here.
Which opened Season 5. So let's jump straight into this story. We start by picking up where the last adventure, The Evil of the Daleks, which round off Season 4, by introducing Victoria to the TARDIS and into the Doctor's world following the events of that story, since the ending of the story saw the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria escaping Scaro's city with the Daleks blowing up. In this episode, we see them go into the TARDIS with Victoria's initial reactions and them heading off on new adventures with them taking Victoria with them. It's a nice little scene that introduces Victoria to the TARDIS, since the last episode didn't end on that. We then begin the main story with a group of expeditionists on the planet Telos looking for the tombs of the Cybermen, who had adopted Telos, as the Sixth Doctor would put it in Attack of the Cybermen, as their second homeworld following the destruction of Mondas in the 10th planet the previous season. We got the expedition leader Mr. Perry, financial backers Eric Cleek and Kaftan, with Kaftan's bodyguard Toberman. We've got Mr. Viner, Mr. Hayden, Captain Hopper, Mr. Callum, and another one or two guys as well in there that do a couple things. One of them is basically, if this story was in colour, he'd be wearing a red shirt, so to speak. Actually, I think one or two others would probably be wearing red shirts as well. So they're able to clear rubble from the tombs of the Cybermen for an archaeological dig. However, when they get to the doors, they find it electrified and are unable to enter, but the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria then turn up and agree to help the expedition remove the electricity from the doors, and they all go inside. The Doctor wants to make sure the Cybermen are staying dead. That's why he's agreeing to stay and help the archaeological dig. And inside, they have to sort out some logistical and logic puzzles to try and investigate and look around the tombs. However, it seems that not all members of the party are quite who they seem. As it turns out, financiers Eric Cleek and Kaftan want to revive the Cybermen so that they, the logicians, can get the power of the Cybermen and they can form an alliance. And they tried, and certainly with Kaftan, she certainly tries to cause a little bit of trouble, including locking Victoria in a revitalization chamber and turning on the revitalization thing. Also, Mr. Hayden gets shot in the back by a new weapon tested by the Cybermen. The first episode is really interesting, despite not having any proper Cybermen in it, and just having these characters exploring the place and interacting with each other. It's really interesting. Usually with classic Who stories, even four-parters can take a very long time to actually build stuff up, and not always interesting, but Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis hit the nail on the head with making all of these characters likable and or interesting to watch on screen as they go around exploring the place. It's nice we've got 3 rooms, not including going outside, to investigate different parts, and it's really interesting how this works. And this extends into episode 2, as well as they do further exploration and even go down to the actual tombs, whilst Kaftan and Klieg step up their plan. And even though one person is killed, Mr. Perry is ready to call off the mission because of that, but the ship is damaged, probably by Cyberman on orders of Kaftan, as it's implied. So they have to stay overnight and continue their exploration. Even though the Cybermen don't turn up until the last couple minutes of part 2, excluding the cyber suit at the end of part 1 and in some bits of early part 2, it's still really interesting to see these humanoid characters interact with each other. If this was a 2 or 3 part story without Cybermen and just really interesting human villains, then I think this story would have been absolutely amazing on its own. As Mr. TARDIS said in his 2010 review of this story, the Cybermen are just a bonus. But we'll get onto that in a bit. But yeah, all of these supporting characters are really likable and or really enjoyable to watch. But what about our main characters? The exact same, with the Doctor being the absolute highlight. Patrick Troughton is on top form. He's had the season to settle into the role, minus the first 2 stories. But seeing how seasons 5 and 6 are 7 stories per season, and Troughton did 7 of the 9 stories in season 4. Technically, it's about the same number per season, and he was great in season 4, but season 5, he steps up his game, and it's some really great bits where the second Doctor is even trying to help out, like touching a couple of buttons behind Klieg's back to help him find the code for the hatch before he knows Klieg's a bad guy. And he's really fun and enjoyable. He even has a couple of digs at some of the characters now and again. But not only is he really fun and enjoyable, but he's also got some pretty deadly serious moments, like when he realises the team are looking for the Cybermen early on in part 1, as well as also when he's confronting the Cybermen. But he's also not afraid to get a little bit afraid when he's confronted by the Cybermen or Cyberman. But my favourite performance from Troughton, full stop, is in part 3, in my favourite scene of this story, where he talks to Victoria about her father from the previous story and his family, and they're just having a nice talk. This is a rare emotional moment from the classic series. They don't really do this that often, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. The score, I believe it was Dudley Simpson who did the music. This scene feels like this could be replicated in a new series story, with Doctors 9 through 13 and one of their companions having a talk, and Murray Gold or Segun Akinola's music in the background, but it fits so perfectly with Troughton and Deborah Watling's Victoria. It's so perfect. And whilst Troughton's Doctor serves as the basis of some personalities of Doctors going forward, as well as some of those that were developed during Hartnell's time, it shows exactly what some of those Doctors would be like in situations like this. These heartfelt moments, it's brilliant. It's so beautiful, and the performances from Troughton and Watling are just perfect. Fraser Hines is also brilliant as Jamie in this story, and he has some really great moments as well. Although I don't know if there's any that are as standout as maybe some other stories, but he's certainly really great. One moment I do really like is when he and Patrick Troughton take each other's hands by mistake and then throw them off. The actors must have improved that. This is Deborah Watling's second story as Victoria, and she's still getting into the role and still getting into the performance, but the character is starting to be a bit more developed, albeit not as well developed as some other characters, both in Classic Who and the new series, of course, but we're starting to see a bit more to her in the story. Maybe she could have been a bit more active, because unfortunately one of the lesser sides of this story is that it is a bit sexist in places. Damn, one of the best stories of the show, and it's the one that has the sexist elements. Damn you! Same for the implied racism side as well with Cyberman. But we do see Victoria doing stuff and interacting with people, so there is stuff for her to do, and she does develop a bit as a character. But I think we will see her doing more and developing more as the series goes on before her exit in Fury from the Deep. Now, when we come to the end of part 2, we have that iconic cliffhanger where the Cybermen are revived and the Cyber Controller is awoken. And this is the first time we see not only the Cyber Controller, but a Cyber Leader in general. The previous 2 stories just featured Cybermen, just plain Cybermen. Some of them had names in 10th Planets, but effectively they were just normal Cybermen. Here we got their first leader, the Cyber Controller, who's basically like the Emperor Dalek, in a way, or at least he would go on to be like the Emperor Dalek, similar to how the Cyber Leader would be something like the Supreme Dalek, for instance. Eventually the heroes, and Klieg but not Cyberman, are able to escape the Cybermen and return to the surface, but Klieg and Kaftan are kept away in the other room. Probably not the best idea to keep them in the weapons room with that gun. But this does give us enough time to have some fun moments with the other characters, and the Cybermen are starting to enact their plan, sending up their Cybermats, which we've been introduced to already, but it turns out Cybermats are kind of like robotic devices, or as we'll find out in closing time, part converted mice rats, and the Cybermen use them to go up and try and attack the people upstairs. Although they don't really cause much harm, but they definitely do cause a bit of a scare. In part 4, Klieg and Kaftan then try to make their bargain with the Cyber Controller, but the Cyber Controller is having none of that, as he's more interested in the Cybermen surviving and converting the humans into Cybermen. As it turns out, he only wanted the really smart humans because they could solve the logistic problems, then the Cybermen could convert really smart humans and then develop a new race of Cybermen to go back to Earth and develop even more Cybermen. In this story, the Cyber Controller's main goal is for his race to survive. That's the Cybermen's end goal in this story, is to just survive and continue, which kind of is their main motive going forward. However, Cyberman is partly converted into a Cyberman before being sent up, and soon Klieg and Kaftan's negotiations start to fail, with the Cyber Controller even shooting Kaftan and killing her. The Doctor then uses this as a way to kind of manipulate Cyberman, or reason with his human side, to go against the Cyber Controller and the cyber programming to enact revenge and justice against what they did to Kaftan, including a moment where the Cyber Controller gets chucked by Cyberman onto a control panel, similar to how Cyberman got chucked by an actual Cyberman earlier on in the previous episode, in a bit where you can see the wires. Whoopsies. The bit where the Cyberman threw Cyberman in part 3. Eventually, Cyberman helps the Doctor seal the tombs down below, but Klieg confronts them, but he's eventually killed by Cybermen, and the remaining crew escape, with the Cyber Controller trying to push the doors open. Cyberman has to close it. This ends up killing him, but Cyberman becomes a hero by the end of the story, and eventually the TARDIS team and Perry's crew part ways. But a little Cybermat has escaped from the tombs, implying the Cybermen will return. A bit like the animated Dalek stories showed a bit of the Daleks' eye stalk rising up, implying the Daleks aren't quite dead yet. There is a few niggles I will mention here. First of all, I'm not a fan of the sexist and racist writing. Yeah, it's a product of the time, but it can be a bit too noticeable. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Blu-ray box sets for Season 5, when the collection Season 5 comes out, the content of this release reflects the broadcast standards, language and attitudes of its time. Some viewers may find this content offensive. Definitely unwarranted. It's a bit nice, but yeah, those are what people would just like back then, I guess. It's a shame. I think if this story was done now, definitely they'd be more worried about the fact that they need to be safe rather than anything else. But even so, with everybody else looking around, I don't think that'd be as much of a problem. One other bit is when, in part 3, all the characters are being struggled about by the Cybermen. There is quite a lot of noise with them all crying out and shouting, and the Cybermen making funny noises until the Cyber Controller shuts them up. Now, visually, all we can kind of see is maybe one of the Cybermen attacking Cyberman, and Jamie trying to make a run for it. But there's a lot of sound in that moment, and I think if this story was one of the missing ones, that would be that, and one there where they just bombard the listener on the CD or in the reconstruction or even the animation. The sound doesn't really line up with the picture as well. That's more of a nitpick rather than anything else, but it did bother me a little that they were doing quite a lot of sound and they were just showing other stuff going on around the people making those noises. Ignoring that and ignoring the mild sexism and racism, this is still an outstanding story. Production is also upped a lot in this story. It's absolutely brilliant sets, and they used the same sets quite a few times, so they didn't have to build too many. It looks absolutely brilliant, and production-wise, it's just absolutely great. So with a brilliant script, great characters, and brilliant performances, both supporting and main, great sets, and an absolutely fantastically made story, the Tomb of the Cybermen easily stands as one of Doctor Who's absolute greats, and certainly a highlight of the 1960s. Like I said, this is my personal favourite Troughton story, and one of my favourites of all time, and I stand by that by giving the Tomb of the Cybermen a dead easy 10 out of 10. This 10 out of 10 is as dead as that Cybermat. Quite alive, actually. As it turns out, as it shoots through Victoria's bag, the Cybermat she picks up. This is an absolutely amazing story, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. And with that being said, the next story of Season 5, The Abominable Snowmen, will continue the Second Doctor's adventures with Jamie and Victoria as they go to meet the Yeti and the Great Intelligence for the first time. And that story will be getting a DVD, Blu-ray and Steelbook release, Monday, and the BFI screening is on tomorrow. We'll have to make a video about that. Before I round off, I'd just like to wish the Tomb of the Cybermen a very happy 55th birthday. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Troughton Month. It's only just beginning, so we've got plenty more Second Doctor and Patrick Troughton content coming your way very, very soon over the coming month. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.